I would say the best thing about shooting on a Sony camera is how many options you have for lenses, especially if you look at budget lenses for the E-mount system. I want to go over 7 of the lenses that I used in my first 2 or 3 years shooting on Sony cameras. And these are all budget lenses, with the least expensive being less than $200 and the higher end of the budget spectrum being about $1,000, in order of how often I use them. Starting with the lens that I use the least, the 35mm f1.8 Rokinon or Samyang lens. This lens I had for the shortest amount of time and used it the least amount. Not because I didn't like it, this is actually my sister's, I'm just borrowing it, but because I replaced it with another lens that I'm gonna go over later. So 35mm is arguably my favorite focal length. This lens, for a budget lens, is really not bad. Pictures look good with it. It's not the sharpest, but for social media content, you're not gonna tell that much. Use that filter for the rest of the video. Think about where are you gonna use these lenses? Where's the work gonna live? Do you need a super high quality lens, or can a budget lens work for you? Autofocus was good on this lens. It was able to stick to the subject. I'll throw up some comparisons of it. I do want to do a video comparing this 35mm, the least expensive autofocus, versus the G Master that I'm shooting on right now. So stay tuned for that. By the way, all links for everything will be in the description below. You could help out a small channel and click a link so I can possibly buy another lens, do some more videos for you guys. Coming up to lens number 2, the Viltrox 20mm 2.8. I thought I was going to use this a lot. I said, oh, I'm going to be vlogging all the time, which I never did one. But this year, I actually will. I wanted it for those wider establishing shots, which I did a couple of times. And I bought it because it was less than 200 bucks. It's like 175. And I needed it for a real estate shoot, a couple of real estate shoots. Yeah, it's not as wide as like a 16mm or 14, which would be great for real estate. But it was able to get the job done, do what I needed it to do. And I mean, if you look at the reviews for it, it's a sharp lens. For a sub $200 lens, people are super surprised with how good the quality actually is on this thing. And for the little that I used it, I was completely satisfied. It did everything I needed it to. Autofocus was great on it. The biggest concern with third-party lenses is how good is the autofocus going to be? And on every single thing, just so I don't have to say for every video, autofocus was good. Every single one of these lenses, the autofocus, I had no issues. It feels a little cheap, but for under $200, what do you expect? Next on the list, the Tamron 24mm f2.8. Now we're getting into some of the lenses that I use pretty solidly. This is the 3rd lens that I ever bought for my camera, and I really enjoy using it. My favorite part about this lens, it's a 1:2 macro lens. So it's not like an actual macro lens where it's a 1:1 ratio, and you can use it for great macro shots and product shots. So I use it a lot for that. I also feel like 24mm is almost a perfect focal length for vertical content, so I use it a lot for vertical stuff. The only thing I didn't love with this lens is this is by far the loudest lens I've ever heard. The autofocus on this thing, it's good autofocus, but it is insanely loud, to the point where if you're using the shotgun mic on the camera, the audio is unusable. If you have to do any kind of focusing, like if you get too close to the camera or too far away from the subject or something, the audio is unusable. So I had to be very mindful of only using it if I had, a lapel mic, so it's further away. If I was going to mute the audio, or if it wasn't something where I needed it very close to the client, like a lot of times I would use this lens for shooting a makeup artist or a tattoo artist. So it's very, very close, so you can see the detail. But if every time you're that close and you just hear the lens, and especially if the room's quiet, it's distracting. So I didn't use, that's what kind of started making me stop using that lens. And I really don't reach for it that much anymore because of that. But for something like this, where it's a talking headshot, great. And I do use this a lot with my FX30, making the 24 a 35mm, roughly. All right, so for this next one, this is not that lens. This is the Tamron 17-28. I'm borrowing this lens to test it out. We're gonna pretend I'm holding the Viltrox 85mm f1.8, but I just sold it. 85mm 1.8 Viltrox. Love it. That lens, so the 85mm focal length is another, arguably my favorite focal length. It's 35, 50, and 85 are my top 3. Portraits look so good on the 85. 85mm compresses the background. The 1.8 makes it nice and blurry as well, and great in low light. So almost everything looks good. You barely have to try with an 85mm lens. And the Viltrox 85mm, it was a metal build, so it wasn't the plastic build like most of these other lenses. It was nice. It's a great lens, very sharp. The only issue I had with it was with the A7 IV, for whatever reason, if you're shooting photos rapidly, sometimes it would freeze the camera, and I had to take the battery out, put the battery back in, and restart the camera. That happened a couple too many times, so I stopped using that lens for a long time. And then I honestly don't remember if I did a firmware update or not, but it stopped having that issue. So then I was back to using it a lot. But oftentimes I love using that lens, and anytime I start seeing the results from it, I'm like, oh, it's going to be tough for me to take this lens off now. For video, I really never used it for video, although I always wanted to. I just never had the right opportunity for it. So that was mainly my photo lens for portraits, for products. I didn't bring it out all the time, but when I did, I knew I was getting some sauce with it. All right, last three, my heavy hitters. So starting off with the Sony 50mm f1.8, the Nifty 50. $200 on sale. This was the first lens I bought for the E-mount system, and it's usually the first lens I recommend for most beginners. 50mm is an excellent focal range to make so many things look good. Great for portraits, great for products, super close to what your eye can see naturally. So it's not a super wide look, it's not super tight. Some people would say that's boring. I think that it's great so you can start beginning to learn composition. I use this for photos, I used it for video. For a little bit of time, this was one of my favorite studio lenses. There's so many options for 50mm lenses too, but the Nifty 50, $200, it's a solid choice. The autofocus is not quiet, so you can hear the motor turning, so it's nowhere near as loud as the Tamron. That is insane. But you can hear it. There is some chromatic aberration, so in some of the high contrast areas, you can tell, all right, this is a budget lens. But I think that's something that we can tell as photographers and videographers. Regular people scrolling by on social, usually they're not going to be able to pick up on something like that. That's not saying to never think about it, but you don't have to get so caught up on it if you're not doing it like professionally. But yeah, this was easily one of my favorite lenses, something that I would reach for very often, especially if I wanted to pack light. Excellent on a gimbal. Yeah, Nifty 50, small, light, fast, good quality. $200 on sale. $250 if you don't catch it on sale. It's either $250 or $300 if you don't catch it on sale. Remember, links below. All those were under about $400 at most. Those were all prime lenses, meaning it's just one focal length. These last two, they're going to be zoom lenses, which makes them a little bit more expensive, but they're still budget lenses. I know some people would want to argue with that since they're about $1,000, but the non-budget version of them, the Sigma 24-70, the G Master 24-70, those are like $2,000. So in that case, these are budget. The 24-105. The year that I bought this, it lived on my camera for the most part. 24-105. So you have so much range on this lens. And it's optical steady shot, OSS, meaning if you pair this with a camera that has in-body stabilization, it is smooth. Like even going handheld, you almost don't need a gimbal. Great build quality, sharp lens. It's an older lens. It's like 2014, I think, when this lens came out. So a lot of people discredit it for that and because it's an f4. And if you're looking on YouTube or anything, a lot of people, they're like, oh, f2.8 or lower, shoot wide open, things like that. F4, you can still get a blurry background, especially if you're shooting, 70 millimeters or above. You're still going to get a compressed background, so it's going to look good. In low light, yeah, it might not be great, but one of the good things about a Sony camera is the low light capabilities are impressive. So you can crank up that ISO a little bit and kind of make up for the fact that it's an f4. To me, I was okay with it being an f4 because of the range. Being able to go from 24mm wide shot to 105mm tight shot, it made it okay. And like I said, for the year that I used it consistently, I never really had that much of an issue. Lastly, the lens that I use the most, my workhorse, the Tamron 28-75. So now's where I kind of contradict myself. I said that f4 was totally fine on this one. Blurry enough background, low light was good, I was able to handle it. This one, you have less range, and it's a 2.8. I bought this one to replace the 24-105 as my main lens because it's a 2.8. And this is by far my #1 most used lens. I almost never take it off. 28 to 75 gives me plenty of range. I use it for weddings all the time, for corporate work, for social media work, photos, video. This lens is my number one lens. I don't know what I would do without it. Well, I'd probably use this one and be fine. But yeah, the 2.8, I decided I wanted just that little bit better low light performance. I wanted that little bit blurrier background. Did I need to upgrade from this one to this one? Probably not, especially now that I'm saying it out loud and kind of looking at the difference between the two. But it is a little bit sharper than the 24 to 105. It's newer, so I liked it for that. But I use more than one camera anyway, so it's okay because then I have a zoom for both cameras. The Tamron 28 to 75, if you can get it on sale, like when I got mine, $699, $700. That's a deal. $700 for a 28 to 75. And like I said, the G Master 24 to 70. Yeah, it's obviously going to be a sharper lens, but is it worth more than double the price? I don't know. So this was a cool one to make. I'm in the process of selling a bunch of lenses and probably buying some new ones, so changing out my kit a little bit. So I wanted to go over some of the budget options before I, get rid of some of them and upgrade to some more higher end lens options. I know I want to do a comparison of the 35 budget one versus the G Master. Let me know what else you want to see as a comparison or any specific lens reviews that you want me to do. Like and subscribe for more. Peace.